Welcome to Golden Moral Stories, where every tale touches your heart and teaches a lesson for life. Today's story is The Bridge of Two Villages. Let's begin. Between two towering mountains, separated by a restless, foaming river, there lived two villages, Revington on the east bank and Hilford on the west. Their rooftops shone under the same sun, their fields drank from the same clouds. Yet they lived as if oceans apart. No one could truly remember when the rivalry began. Some elders claimed it started when Hilford's traders accused Revington of undermeasuring grain. Others swore it began when a Revington farmer refused to share water during a drought. Over the decades, the stories grew twisted, each side painting the other as selfish and untrustworthy. Children grew up hearing warnings. Dante wandered too close to the river. Those people are not like us. The only connection between the two was a creaky wooden boat owned by Garth, an old boatman with a weather-beaten face. His hands were calloused, his eyes as sharp as river stones. He ferried people across for a fare that many considered unfair, but without him, crossing was near impossible. Only a handful of traders bothered, and even then, they kept their visits short. In Revington lived Thomas, a quiet but skilled carpenter. His workshop smelled of fresh pine and cedar, and he could shape wood as if it were an extension of his own hands. Though his talent brought him respect, it didn't bring riches. Thomas lived alone in a small cottage, his days filled with mending chairs, building cradles, and crafting toys for children who couldn't afford them. Across the churning waters in Hilford lived Eleanor, the daughter of a humble farmer who kept a modest apple orchard. Her apples were known to be the sweetest in the valley, not because of rare soil, but because she cared for each tree as if it were family. She dreamed of selling her apples in Revington's bustling market, but Garth's fees would take nearly all her profit. One late autumn night, a storm unlike any in living memory swept through the valley. Black clouds clawed at the moon, and rain fell in sheets, rattling rooftops and flooding fields. The river swelled, its voice turning from a murmur to a roar. Lightning struck the great oak near the dock, sending it crashing into the water with a deafening crack. The dock splintered, the boat broke its tether, and both were swallowed by the raging current. By morning, the river had calmed, but the damage was done. The dock was gone, the boat was gone, and with them, the last thread tying Revington and Hilford had snapped. In Hilford, Eleanor stood at the edge of the bank, clutching a basket of apples she now had nowhere to sell. In Revington, Thomas stared at the swollen waters, thinking of merchants who relied on goods from across the way. Neither knew the other existed, but both felt the same hollow ache. As days passed, the absence of the boat began to reshape life. Farmers couldn't trade seed. Craftsmen couldn't deliver goods. Even letters, carried only occasionally across the water, stopped altogether. Some villagers shrugged and muttered, "It's for the best, less trouble from them." But the silence between the two villages felt heavier than ever. Thomas was not the sort to accept such endings. Sitting at his workbench late one night, lit only by a single oil lamp, he thought, if this river becomes a wall, both our worlds will grow smaller, poorer, colder. An idea began to take shape in his mind, an idea made of timber and trust. The next morning, with the mist still curling over the water, Thomas appeared at the riverbank, carrying a measuring rope, a hammer, and a pouch of nails. He planted stakes in the ground, pacing the bank with careful steps, sketching on rough parchment. A neighbor paused on the path and asked, "What on earth are you doing?" Thomas, still working, replied, "I'm building a bridge." To them, the neighbor scoffed. They'd never do the same for you. Thomas shrugged. Maybe not, but someone has to take the first step. On the opposite shore, Eleanor noticed the lone carpenter working. She heard whispers about the man from Revington, who was foolish enough to try bridging the river. But instead of scoffing, she felt a spark of hope. The next morning, she lashed together several sturdy logs from an old fence and floated them downstream toward Thomas's side. When he caught the bundle, Thomas waved and shouted, "You don't even know me." "I don't have to," Eleanor called back. "I just know we need this." From that day, small bundles of wood, rope, and even nails began appearing from the Hilford side. It was a silent partnership to strangers bound by the same vision. Soon, curious children began gathering to watch. At first, they came for the novelty of it, but as days turned to weeks, they started carrying buckets of water, holding nails, or passing tools. A blacksmith in Raventon, seeing the effort, offered strong iron bolts. A rope maker in Hilford sent his finest cords. Bit by bit, the bridge grew not just from Thomas's labor, but from the quiet contributions of people who began to believe. Of course, not everyone was convinced. An elder in Raventon grumbled, "What if they use this bridge to take what's ours?" A woman in Hilford whispered, "What if they bring their troubles here?" But each day the bridge rose higher, and each day the doubts lost a little more ground. Midway through construction, disaster nearly struck. While carrying a heavy beam toward the edge, Thomas slipped on damp planks. The beam rolled toward the water, and without thinking, Eleanor dashed across the unfinished structure to grab it. The wood beneath her feet shifted dangerously. Thomas lunged forward, gripping her wrist as the current thundered below. For a breathless moment, they stood locked in place, two people from rival worlds, bound by survival. Then, with one pull, he brought her to safety. They set the beam aside, exchanging a smile that needed no words. The work continued, faster now, as if the river itself had grown eager for the connection. Winter's breath was on the air when the final plank was hammered into place. The bridge stood strong, its oak rails smooth, stretching from bank to bank like an unspoken promise. On opening day, people gathered on both shores, murmuring nervously. Then Thomas stepped onto the bridge from the east, and Eleanor from the west. They met in the middle, shook hands, and the crowd erupted in cheers that rolled over the water like music. The months that followed transformed both villages. Eleanor's apples filled Raventon's market again, and Thomas's furniture found homes in Hilford. Children met halfway to play marbles or share stories. Traders crossed daily, carrying goods, ideas, and laughter. The river had not shrunk, it was still wide and wild, but now it carried voices, not suspicion. One evening, as the sun melted into gold over the water, Thomas and Eleanor stood side by side on the bridge. "It's strange," Eleanor said quietly. "All my life, I thought this river was a wall." "Maybe it was," Thomas replied, "but walls can become bridges if someone dares to start building." And from that day forward, no one spoke of them and us anymore. There was only us. And the bridge, weathered by years, still stood proof that kindness, once planted, can grow strong enough to span even the widest divides. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe to Golden Moral Stories, and press the bell icon so you never miss a heart-touching tale. See you in our next video.